So, folks, it's been the first taste of wet weather footy so far this year. Still not very cold, though. I don't reckon there's been any long sleeves out and about. Been plenty of stretched hammies, I reckon, and some dicky knees. There's been some big hits already and some big suspensions. There's been some broken losing streaks. That's pretty exciting. Big margins, close margins. Not sure about draws. If your side's had a draw, let us know. Haven't heard about one yet. The Carlton draft picks have been announced. Maybe you're getting an AFL legend coming to your local club sometime soon. There's been Anzac commemorations all around the state. We love to see that. There's been welcomes to country, welcomes to controversy, welcome to Got the 4 Points, and welcome to you, Pete.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, it's been a big week of footy. Yeah, Anzac sort of round matches. I know some matches actually played on Anzac Day, and a lot still playing on the Saturday, but commemorating what is Anzac Day, and it's always a really good weekend to reflect on the history and also get to enjoy some football as well. And yeah, we got some wet weather conditions, not horrible wet weather conditions, but certainly not as nice as what we've had the first few weeks in local footy. But the Blacks got a win, so you and I are probably much happier come come this episode than what we maybe have been in some other episodes. And it was a good win against the arch rival Uni Blues for us in the Anzac Derby. So we are both very, very happy. But how have you been, Rob?
Yeah, good mate, going well. That definitely pumped up after a Anzac Derby clash win for the Blacks. Yeah, good to see some rain. It's been pretty dry around Victoria, so we're happy about that for all the farmers and all the people that need to water the garden. And yeah, no, going well, mate. I'm excited to be into footy season. Um, we've got 3 or 4 episodes. We've got the 4 points in our regular schedule out at the moment throughout this season. If you're listening to this one and didn't listen to the last one, check it out because we had a pretty special guest, Brandon Weatherson. That was a lot of fun to interview him, current Carisbrook coach in the Maryborough Castlemaine League. Just a reminder that we're on Spotify if you want to hear our voices and not see our faces. Um, we're going out on YouTube as per usual. It got the 4 points. And you can check out our Instagram as well. We'll be posting stuff there as we go. So today, what we're going to do is have a bit of a chat about some of the local results. We've been a few interesting news stories in local footy, which we'll touch on in a What Caught My Eye segment. We'll also have a little look at some of the merger situations and potential league shifts up in northern Victoria and southern New South Wales. That'll kind of wrap up today's episode. But to start us off, Pete, what's caught your eye lately?
Yeah, so there's been a few things that have caught my eye over the last couple of weeks. Noting that, of course, with the interview last episode, we didn't necessarily follow our normal got the 4 point structure, but so we've had a couple of weeks of some really interesting things happening. But one of the first things for me was it was Corridor Rutherglen. We've spoken about them a few times, both this season and last season, and they dismantled the Wodonga Raiders for their first win in 2025. So that was really impressive. Last year, they only won the one game, and that was sort of late in the year. This year, they've already won a game. They were sitting 1-1 until the weekend just gone. They did unfortunately lose, but only lost to Yarrawonga by 20 points,
Oh,
which
that's
um, which
good.
is which is really good. Yarrawonga, as we know, have been a powerhouse of that Ovens and Murray League for quite some time. And so, yeah, I was quite buoyed by that in what we've discussed a lot around Cora Rutherglen, around that sustainability and coming back out of recess. So big credit to them there. It looks like they're doing some good things. It looks like they've got their tails up, which is great. Then the other thing that caught my eye, we spoke a few weeks back in one of our episodes around Portland, and they broke one of their long losing streaks. And I think remember the story of them testing out the theme song because it hadn't been played in a couple of years. Well, I can tell you it's been getting a fair test because they've managed to go 3 from 3. So they won round two against Terang Mortlake and then had a third win on the weekend over Hamilton. So they're 3 from 3, top of the ladder, percentage of 179%. Yeah, they're now on a winning streak, and the losing streak is most definitely in the rearview mirror. So a couple of really good stories there between those two clubs. But Rob, as we know with local footy, with the good also comes the bad, and we've spoken in our pre-season episodes for this year around some of the big recruits that were coming into local footy. One of the ones you mentioned was Noah Cumberland, that was going to be playing for South Morang. And he unfortunately, late in the pre-season in training, hurt his ankle, and that kept him out for the first 2 rounds of the season. Well, he probably had a debut to forget on the weekend for South Morang against Greensborough. Not only did they lose, but he also got cited for an off the ball hit, which it has been captured on video, and both you and I have watched the video, and certainly hasn't covered himself in any glory with that hit, and that's a 2 week suspension that he's been handed on the basis of that hit. So probably not what South Morang were envisioning, not having him for the first 2 rounds with the ankle injury, and then having him in and he's suspended straight away. And I don't know, you start to think clearly a very, very talented player, and he always looked like he had a lot of talent there at Richmond. But maybe we're seeing some of the reasons why he's no longer in the AFL system, because that was quite a silly thing to do. And then, Rob, even more sort of serious on that front was, and some people might have seen this in some of the papers, but Jack Skinner for Colac. They were playing Bell Park a couple of weeks back, and it was another off the ball hit. And that has resulted in some serious harm to the player that got hit. They have spent some time in hospital. It certainly hasn't been sort of a smooth sailing in terms of getting back up off the hit and just continuing to play. There was certainly stoppage of play to get that player off, and they've spent quite some time in hospital. That's resulted in a 6 week suspension. This is a saga that's somewhat continuing, though, with Bell Park, the club, and also the family of the player affected by that off the ball hit, pushing very strongly that 6 weeks actually isn't enough, and strongly urging the league to look at a longer suspension. So I did do a little follow up on that, and there's been no further word since that article sort of last week. But that's probably one to keep your eye on as we move through, because certainly there is a push there for more than 6 weeks, which, yeah, I think both of those, Rob, really disappointing. I think we love footy when it's tough, hard, contested, but we love that when it's at the ball and it's all players playing in the right spirit. And some of that, what I like to call fake toughness off the ball. It's I think it's such a drawback of our great game, and I think it's something that we'd like to see less and less of, to the point where we don't see it at all in our footy game. I'm always interested for those people that sort of do that. I want to see, put your head over the ball and win the ball that way and show some toughness there, because I reckon you and I have probably, over our period of time in local footy, seen a lot of players that love a little bit of biffo off the side, but when the ball's there to be won, to put your head over it, might not necessarily be the first bloke putting the head over the ball. Um, so a couple of little disappointing ones there. What I will finish on though, a real positive, Sam Wiedemann. We spoke a little bit about Sam Wiedemann as one of the big recruits for Vermont, which is his local club, so home club. So he's back playing at home after being delisted. In his first game back, not the weekend gone, but the week before that, he managed to kick six. So kick six, they got the job done by, I think it was around a couple of goals. So an important six when you only win by a couple of goals. And on the weekend gone, he only kicked one, but they had another impressive close win against Josh Shackey's team, actually. So there's a few AFL players or ex-AFL players running around the park at the minute. But it was great too. I did read an article where Sam Wiedemann was talking about just how much he enjoyed being back in local footy, playing for his home club. And there's some footage of some of the goals that he kicked in that first game back, and you can see the excitement when he's kicking the goals and getting around the crowd. So good on him. I think he looks like he'll have a very enjoyable season if he continues the way that it started. But those are some of the things that have caught my eye over the last couple of weeks, Rob. Amidst, we could probably do a 2 hour session where we go through everything that's caught our eyes, but those are probably the high level ones. But keen to hear from you, mate, and what's been taking your interest over the last couple of weeks in local footy.
Yeah, great summary, Pete. Little frog in the throat here. Yeah, look, the hits off the ball caught my eye too, and yeah, totally echo what you said about not wanting to see that in the game, and especially not from your AFL recruits coming down and the people you'd sort of be expecting perhaps to set the example. But we've seen a few off the ball hits, or at least a few reckless hits in the AFL as well. So it's
Yeah,
arguably coming from the top. We need to have that stamped out from the top down.
definitely.
But hey, let's go to some really good news, Pete. Because the first thing that really caught my eye in the last couple of weeks, um, you did talk about Portland having broken their losing streak and they're on a winning streak. Well, Karamit's losing streak in the Mindanao League was even longer.
It
It was
was.
41 games heading into this season, but round one against Moyston Wallora, they've snapped the 41 game losing streak, and they won by 32 points. Now, we can't possibly read out the scores for every game, but because this is such a momentous occasion, breaking a 41 game losing streak, I'm going to read the score out. Glorious news for Caramit fans. 14-10-94 versus 8-14-62. Not very good kicking there by Moist and Laura, but hey, doesn't matter. Caramit got the job done. Now, we've all heard about a premiership hangover, but what I want to know is what colour the town of Caramit was painted on Saturday night. They are already red and white. Um, and yeah, the premiership hangovers are one thing, but perhaps the breaking 41 game losing streak hangover is also quite a thing
Is it
because they ended up getting done by Great Western by 10 goals the following week. So
is it too early that early in the season to do a lock in after a win? Is
no,
it
not
it's
after a win like that. I reckon
uh,
I don't know what the pub's called in Caramit, but I reckon they might have run out of beer down there. So great news for Caramit. Unlike Portland, though, they haven't continued on with the winning streak. Um, I can't remember who they're playing this week, but fingers crossed that they will have a more successful season. Certainly started out on the right note. Um, Another red and white team, Pete, South Bendigo. They're looking pretty strong. They're getting some good runs on the board there, so to speak, in the Bendigo League. Um, and in the Sunraysia League, I've also been very interested to note that Robinvale Euston are 3-0 with what's reported in the Weekly Times as the lowest player points total in the state. Now, this is coming after copping a fairly hefty whack for a salary cap breach, which
yep.
we talked about in one of our other episodes. And So that's pretty impressive by Robinvale Houston. That's really showing a lot of character as a club, I think, to come back from that situation, take the hit financially, take
Mm.
the hit in terms of player points, and still apparently manage to recruit pretty strongly, or at least develop their talent pretty strongly. Very good start to the year for them.
How many
Uh,
points? Do you know how many points they are on?
no, I can't remember. I
We
did
might.
read it, but I can't remember. Sorry.
That's right.
I'll
We
be
might have
interested to
to
look.
look through that. Yeah.
We can look into that next week. Um, what caught my eye in a more disappointing note, I mean, we're going to touch our paddock to premiership picks later in the episode, but I just had to put in here, we've been chatting a bit about this behind the scenes. Are Fitzroy in trouble in Prem B? Well, the answer is a firm, resounding yes. Um, they're sitting bottom of the table in Prem B, having dropped from Prem A in the VAFA last season. Uh, Percentages in the 50s. Another big loss on the weekend against Williamstown. Actually, it wasn't a huge loss, but still not a good result. I think it
Mm.
might have only been 20 points in the end, but still a
Think the
disappointing loss
yeah the
for Fitz.
gravity of that loss is probably it's a big loss, not necessarily in terms of margin, but the gravity of that loss is probably a game they would have probably penciled in as we
Yeah,
need to win it and a winnable game.
yeah.
It's certainly big.
And Pete, the alarm bells are really flashing down there at Fitzroy. They play Old Camberwell this week.
Doesn't get
Now,
any easier.
now, Hampton Rovers are the other team in Prem B that haven't won a game. Old Camberwell beat them by 154 points.
Okay.
So, um, as I said, the red lights are flashing
Mm,
at Fitzroy. Um, I reckon they just need to try and put in a performance of some description in that
yeah.
game against Old Camberwell
Think
and rebound
yeah.
for some of the games
I
in the
I
following weeks.
I know I was chatting to our good friend Beefy at the Blacks around Fitzroy and Prem B, and I think the line I used with him is Prem B, it's a lion's den. It's an absolute lion's den, Prem B. There is nothing that says dropping from A grade to B grade guarantees you a smooth season that's going to potentially put you in a position to get back into A grade because there are so many teams in Prem B that are so even and really pushing to make A grade.
Yeah,
And I think you're right. I think the alarm bells are certainly absolutely ringing at Fitzroy at the minute. But yeah, hopefully they can just get the monkey off the back in the yeah, if not this week, in the next couple of weeks. I think the earlier you can get that first win, it just allows you to breathe a little bit and start to make your way. Let's not forget when we did do our analysis of Prem B earlier in the year. Williamstown were in a similar position in Prem B last year. Really, really struggled and then had a 6 to 8 week period at the back end of the season where they were like almost the best team in in Prem B,
yeah, yeah.
outside of maybe Old Hailbury. Um, so yeah, I think we'll have to keep an eye on that as we will, given it's one of your paddock to premiership clubs. But yeah, not good signs there at Fitzroy.
So, Pete, another exciting or a more exciting element that I just wanted to touch on briefly before we get into some footy fire starters. The Carlton draft. That's draft, uh, as distinct from the beer. We're not plugging any particular beer brands here. Um, the Carlton draft. It's a pretty cool initiative, I think.
Yep.
It's gained a lot of traction through local footy in Victoria and indeed right round Australia. And it's for those who are not familiar, it's a initiative where former AFL greats are go into a pool, and local footy clubs can apply to pick them from the pool to play one game at their local team. And we've seen some absolute success stories and some hilarious stories and just general good fun and certainly massive gate takings, massive interest around small country towns or local footy clubs when these events happen. Uh, the local clubs get a bit of TV time, plenty of social media interest. Anyway, it's a great initiative. It's being run again this year. So, uh, pick one in the Carlton draft went to a Victorian team, Pete, not very far from where we grew up,
Yep.
the little town of Beaufort in the Central Highlands Footy League.
Hmm.
So they're securing the services of Tom Hawkins, who has actually already been playing a little bit of local footy for Finley,
Correct.
for the Old Melburnians. We might not have played for OMs yet, but he's slated
Don't.
to play a game for them later
Yeah,
in the
correct.
year.
Yeah, yeah. But
Uh,
yeah, I think he kicked 4 or 5 for Finley on the weekend just gone. I feel like
yeah,
I did see. So
yeah, and mixing it up with his commentary duties as well on the weekend in the AFL. Um, so Beaufort, the Crows, they're getting one of the few teams in Victoria that wear the Adelaide colours, interestingly, from what I can tell. But anyway, Tommy Hawkins is going to Beaufort. So who else have we got? Just looking through my list here. Brett Deledio, he's a pretty well-known player, multiple club player for Richmond and GWS. He's going to Columbally in the Farrer League in New South Wales. Um, so actually, Columbally are doing pretty well. I think when they applied for the Carlton draft, they were struggling. They only won 2 games in 2024, but they've actually won their first 2 games this year. So they're doing all right. Maybe they don't need Brett Deledio, but anyway, that's where Brett's going. Um, Beverley Redbacks in Western Australia, they're getting the services of Matthew Pavlich for a day. Yeah, I
it's not
mean,
bad.
looking at him on the TV, he looks like he's still in very good nick.
He does.
Um, yes, so that'll be fun for whoever's lining up on Matthew Pavlich against Beverley. Um, so the Southwest District League has Heathmere, and they've got Travis Cloak, another one that some poor country fullback is going to have an absolute nightmare lining up on, I suspect. Travis Cloak declared in his little interview here after the Carlton draft picks that he was just going to be having shots if he was anywhere within 70. So I don't know how his hamstrings are going, but that he's pretty confident by the sounds of it. Um, in the Mid Gippsland League, Hill End and Grove, one of those great names. It sounds like some little British football team in the Cotswolds or something. They've got Will Schofield, former West Coast player.
I was just about to say, so many times with this Carlton draft, you see it's either the midfielder or the big forward. It's great to see that some poor full forward is now going to have to match up against Will Schofield, who
Yeah.
was, one of the classic, just really locked down, key defenders. So I like that we've finally gotten a key defensive player in the Carlton draft.
I'm with you. I do wonder though whether he will actually be in the back line in country footy. I'm not sure. He might be told to go and sit in the midfield. Um,
Maybe.
anyway, let's see. Good luck to everyone playing and also playing with those players. That's got to be very exciting. I know from all reports the excitement around especially some of the younger players in those country footy teams who get to sit on the pine next to one of your absolute all-time idols, or even if you're playing on them, the opportunity to
Mm,
get to know people like that and have a beer with them after the game.
mm.
Yeah, great initiative.
Who would you have picked first, Rob? You get the option, your club's got it. Who would have been your number one pick?
There's no doubt for me that the number one draft pick that was chosen for me is the number one pick of that lot. I think Tom
You
Hawkins.
reckon?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
I
Most
reckon I would have
recent
gone
dominant
Pav.
player.
I would have gone Pav.
Yeah, I mean Hawk's much more recent. So
He is. But I think Pav is so. If Pav had have played in Victoria, we would be
yeah,
talking about him as one of the best forwards that ever played the game.
yeah,
The fact that he played for Freo means that
yeah,
we barely talk about him at all. But
yeah,
I don't know. I reckon I saw a photo of Tom Hawkins, and I reckon he's been in a similar paddock that I've been in, which is quite a good one because I reckon he's put a couple on. So, which, mind you, it's not going to make it any easier for the full back that he that he
certainly not.
absolutely terrorizes
Yeah,
in that game.
yeah,
But I think it's great. I think you and I have spoken about how great it is, this initiative. I think even outside of this initiative, you and I have spoken about the uniqueness of elite AFL players finishing their career and coming to play local football, even outside of the Carlton draft. And, I know you've got the likes of, Dane Swan is still out there running around. I saw, Mitch Robinson from
yeah,
ex-Brisbane's been doing that a lot now. I see Stephen Mill pulled the boots on the weekend again, um, and was out there running. But I even remember, growing up, that Castlemaine back in the day had Jason Ackermanis. He came out and
yeah,
he was doing some one-off games in a lot of places. It is just such a unique element of our sport. And you don't, it's not often you go to a rec league basketball game in the States and, Jason Tatum's out there, shooting hoops. So don't get me wrong, some of them do play a little bit of rec league ball, but certainly not to the same level that it happens from
yeah.
an AFL perspective. So yeah, that's going to be exciting to see when those. Do we have any idea yet when the matches that they'll be playing, or has that still got to be worked through now that they've been selected?
No, no dates announced yet. So
Okay.
if you're in one of those clubs or in one of those leagues, even, yeah, keep your ear out for the fixtures when those boys will be heading your way. So, Pete, normally Footy Firestarters is your domain, but I've gone ahead and had a little look. I'm going to give you a little introduction here to some interesting local footy happenings up in the north of Victoria and also southern New South Wales. I want to take you up to the Northern Rivers region.
Hmm.
Um, I was a little bit intrigued. There's been some reporting around what's going on in the Northern Rivers region under something called Project Northern Rivers, and it's been developed as a concept as a result of various challenges facing local footy in that part of the country. So, football in this region, in the Northern Rivers region, is governed by an overarching body called Central Rivers Football, a little bit like AFL Goldfields covers Bendigo, Ballarat sort of areas.
Yep.
Um, so they're responsible for two leagues, the Central Murray Football League and the Golden Rivers Football League. There's a lot of rivers names in this. Anyway, Central Murray and Golden Rivers are the two leagues involved. So the Central Murray League currently has the following teams, and I've actually listed them here in order of the current ladder positions. So the Mallee Eagles, who were formerly called Lalbert,
Yep.
Wuranine, Kahuna, Tulibuck, Manangatang, close to your heart, of course, Kundruk, Barham, Nyania West United, Lake Boga, Kerrang, Kintinda, Swan Hill, and Balranald. Some of country football's greatest names in that collection.
Definitely.
And the Mallee Eagles, formerly Lalbert, look to be the team to beat at the moment. They're 3-0 with a percentage of nearly 400. They're doing pretty well. So the Golden Rivers League, um, which is quite close by, and in fact, the regions for these two leagues overlap somewhat.
Yep.
Currently only has 6 teams. They are Hay, Ultima, Murrabit, Macorna, Wandella, and Moolameen. So these leagues, as I said, geographically are quite close together. One of them only with 6 teams. Both of those leagues having issues insofar as clubs wanting to leave. So last year, Ultima won the flag, and has to be said, in one of the all-time great grand finals going around. I've had a look at the scores throughout that day, and it was a seesawing affair that ultimately got up by a point um, over Hay. So, um, interestingly, those two teams, Hay and Ultima, are currently top of the table, or one and two on the Golden Rivers table, and far and away the strongest clubs by the looks. Um, so, after having won the flag, however, Ultima actually requested a transfer to the Central Murray Football League. So, a transfer to the neighbouring league. And this was actually voted as a yes by the Central Murray Football League, the league they were requesting to go to, but was voted down by the board members of the various clubs um, by the Golden Rivers Footy League. So the league they were requesting to leave, said no.
Okay.
And ultimately, that left the decision with the overarching body, the Central Rivers Association, and they rejected the application. If that had gone ahead, the Golden Rivers League would have been down to 5 teams in 2025.
Mm.
And I can only imagine that that's the reason that the other clubs voted against it. They didn't want to lose another team, especially given that in the last 3 years, Nullarbor have already left the
Yep.
Golden Rivers League to head to the North Central Football League, and Quambatook unfortunately folded.
Correct. Yeah.
So dropped from an 8-team league 3 years ago, and it was threatening to become a 5-team league. Interestingly, at the Central Murray League, things are also not as rosy, perhaps, as they might look, even though they have more teams. Kahuna have actually twice requested to leave that league and go and play in the Heathcote District Football Netball League. Actually, when you look at the map, that does make some sense. Kahuna are a pretty long way from a lot of the clubs in that league,
Yep.
and a little bit closer to some of the other teams in that North Central Victorian area around Heathcote. So there's lots of clubs wanting to be on the move. Um, what's going on? I think this is an interesting question. The Weekly Times is currently reporting that, in response to this wide-scale movement, or hopes of movement, perhaps you might say, the
Mm.
Central Rivers Board is actively considering a proposal to have a single league in that region with two divisions, including relegation and promotion. So I thought this is interesting, given that we've talked about this in other contexts. We've talked a little bit about how we like the relegation and promotion in the VAFA. Pete, the geography in this area is pretty big. I mean, when you get up into northern Victoria, you're talking about big, big distances. I had a bit of a look on Google Maps. So at the moment in the Central Murray League, if you were to go the longest possible distance from Kahuna to Balranald up there in southern New South Wales, that's 180 kilometres. So that's a 2-hour trip.
Yeah. Wow.
You're talking about something similar to Melbourne to Bendigo.
Mm.
Um, if you're in the Golden Rivers League, remember with only 6 teams, the longest journey is 2 hours and 35 minutes, which is from Maccorner in Victoria to Hay, also in southern New South Wales. The Victoria New South Wales thing is all a bit of much of a muchness, really. The Murray River almost runs north-south in that region. So you
Yeah.
can be in New South Wales and still be south of quite a lot of Victoria. But nevertheless, some very, very long journeys up there.
Mm.
So that's an interesting factor in thinking about a merge. My bet, as I said, is that Kahuna might have wanted to join the Heathcote League to avoid some of those really long trips. Um, but yes, even if those leagues were to merge, you're still going to have. It's not a situation where you're going to remove a lot of large trips. You're gonna keep that intact. Just a look at the state of the leagues. As I said, in the Golden Rivers League, Ultima won the flag, and that was a very close contest, and a very close contest all year between Ultima and Hay at the top of the ladder. Um, they only lost 1 and 2 games respectively in the home and away all season, Ultima and Hay. Um, looking at the bottom end of the ladder, the bottom 3 teams had 5, 3, and 3 wins each, and there are some leagues around the state where the bottom couple in the table are not winning a game, or only having one. And so actually, I think in a six-team league, the bottom teams having 5 and 3 wins is actually not bad and indicative that it's reasonably competitive. You're thinking that whenever you're not playing Ultima or Hay,
Mm.
you're probably having a reasonably competitive game of footy.
Yeah.
But still, there's evidence there maybe that the top two teams in that league deserve to be promoted up to
Yeah.
some higher division. In the Central Murray League, Nine West United won the flag in 2024 with a big win over Kerrang in the grand final, although actually Kerrang were 2 games clear at the top of the ladder at the end of the home and away season. The bottom three teams in the Central Murray League had 3, 2, and 1 win respectively, so maybe a little more uneven at the bottom end of the ladder, but actually only 3 games separated fourth from eighth on the ladder. So once again, I would say looks like a reasonably competitive league.
Mm.
So I suppose what I'm interested in is a situation where the vast majority of games are reasonably competitive, even though you've got one or two standouts. Does that mean we should be looking at a merged league, a single league? We'd be going from a league of five and a league of 10, I think it is, to 15.
Mm.
That's pretty healthy competition. Um, how do you split that up? Is it, do you try and split it roughly in half? You're still going to end up with divisions where you've got um, a small and a large potentially, or two small
Mm.
leagues effectively. Um, so how is that going to work? How will the promotion relegation work? I think it's great they're looking at it. But Pete, I'm keen to get your thoughts on that Northern Victorian situation.
Yeah, that's it's a good summary, Rob. But gee, I might not get Footy Firestarters back if you keep bringing good content like that. I might lose the rights to it. But
No, you can have
I
it.
I think the first thing that comes to my mind, and I think we've discussed this a little bit before, is I feel free to correct me if I'm wrong here, because it's just, but you haven't mentioned it in any of your summary, is just what role AFL Victoria play in all of this. Like, I don't know. At times, I just feel it's just left up to the devices of the clubs and the leagues, and I just sometimes think that with a geographical location of that sort of north, that northern Victoria, like, yeah, there is, like, it is just the nature of the beast that, from one town to the next town, it's a couple hours drive. Like, yeah, it's not necessarily like a Bendigo or a Ballarat, or even some of your other leagues like a Loddon Valley and things like that, where there's still a bit of driving in, say, like your Loddon Valleys, but it's not necessarily that 2 hour level for sure. Um, so if you think about it, what Bendigo to Swan Hill is like 2 hours. So, technically, you could be having Bendigo teams in that league, based off the fact that they're already driving 2 hours in some of those instances for, say, like the Kahuna to Balranald. But yeah, I think that's probably the first thing I think of, is what's the AFL Vic role in all of this? Because I think at times it's I think it's too hard for a lot of these clubs and leagues to actually make a decision that I think is fair and equitable for all. Um, and I think that the consideration needs to be around, what does travel time look like? I think if we're looking at participation rate for football, I don't know if this bit hypocritical, because I definitely take longer than 2 hours to get into Blacks games because I live in Castlemaine. But if I was still playing, if you told me that it was a 2.5 hour drive to get to our game, I don't know whether I'd really want to play, in all honesty. I'd be like,
And it's
but
especially bad, Pete, when you think about trying to include junior football and netball in that too, and you're asking parents to get their kids to a place 2.5 hours away for an 8:30, 9 o'clock start, you know, and then you're asking that the coaches are asking them to be there an hour and a half before the game to warm up. Like
yeah,
that's really difficult.
No, agreed. And so, but I think what is encouraging to me is that they're not sort of asleep at the wheel. Like they understand they need to look at this. They are looking at it in terms of the leagues, and they're looking at what might be the right way to go. Like it is worrying when you've got the all of those teams that you mentioned that in recent time have all tried to part those couple of leagues to merge into somewhere else. But again, I think there's got to be a level of, if it makes more sense for Kahuna to be in the Heathcote League based off travel distances, then this is where I'd like to see AFL Vic come in and go, you know what? We're not waiting on approval from that league and approval from this league. We're actually just making the call for you, because it's going to be for the benefit of local football moving forward. So, but then I know, like, I could have this wrong, but I always feel like I remember the story. If you ever remember the Alberton Football Netball League back in the day, and um, they were struggling, and I could have this story wrong, but I feel like I remember AFL Victoria did like a study into or research into what's the best course of action for the Alberton Football Netball League. And I think that research showed that they should merge in with the Mid Gippsland Football League. And then I think the Alberton League went, okay, perfect. That's what the research and the strategy has said. And I think they applied to do that the next year, and AFL Vic blocked it. And it was like, what? I could have that wrong, but I feel like that was the story, some maybe 5, 6 years ago. It was sort of like, hang on, didn't you actually, facilitate the study that said it should be a merge? I do know that those leagues have now merged into the Mid Gippsland League, so it eventually did get done. But um, I think that level of thinking needs to be considered for sure. It'd be interesting to know what East Gippsland does, because if we talk about large distances, East Gippsland is massive.
Mm.
And I know there is it the Omeo Benambra League um, over that way, where I think there is only about 4 or 5 clubs in the competition, but such huge sort of areas to cover. Um, yeah, I think that's where my mind goes, is when you ask, could it be a merged, single league? Could it be a promotion relegation league? I just want AFL Vic to get involved and make a call. Let's stop leaving these decisions up to, the hardworking volunteers that already are doing so much. And let's actually give them some support. Maybe that's what the staff there at the Central Rivers are doing. Hopefully it is, but yeah, I always get a little bit uneasy when I hear of clubs being knocked back because the presidents of the other clubs have knocked that back, because of course they're making a decision that's best for their interest, which I understand, don't get me wrong. But it's not necessarily at the best interest of the club that's made that submission. Um, it is sad. I know it was sad a couple of years ago when we did lose Quambatook. I know that was a really sad period, losing Quambatook as a football club, because um, yeah, we talk about it being the lifeblood of a lot of these towns, and they'd made that conscious decision that it was time to wrap up. So where do you sit with it all?
Yeah, I think you've got a point there about needing some guidance. Um, I'm not sure if I necessarily think that AFL Vic should step in, but I think they should definitely be, in the consultation process and providing that overarching perspective. I totally agree with that. Um, the concern, I guess, that I have about um, a situation like Kahuna wanting to leave the Central Murray League for the Heathcote League is that Northern Victorian region along the Murray has a lot of football clubs, and a lot of them are that hour and a half, 2 hour distance from the two southern New South Wales clubs that are Balranald and Hay. Balranald and Hay at the moment are in different leagues, but the problem is if you are allowing too many of these Northern Victorian teams to go with some of their closer neighbours in slightly further south in Northern Victoria, you might end up with a situation where those two New South Wales teams are isolated. And looking at the number of communities around a town like Hay, I actually don't know what the situation is for Aussie rules football in southern New South Wales around Hay. I don't know if there's another league there. Would be interested to look that up and find out. But my sense, looking at the size of the communities there, is that if Hay isn't playing against those Northern Victorian clubs, they're not getting a game.
Yep.
So if too many of those Northern Victorian teams are allowed to move for the good of their clubs in the short term, perhaps, it might spell the end for some of those more far-flung teams where, unfortunately, it's an hour and a half, 2 hour drive or it's nothing.
Mm.
And we definitely don't want nothing for those communities. And I think, I don't know whether Balranald and Hay are falling under AFL New South Wales or whether AFL Victoria is covering that. That's another potentially difficult aspect of this. I would hope that it's coming under AFL Victoria, given that they're playing in leagues where the majority of clubs are Victorian. But yeah, I think even though I agree with you that those distances are not ideal, there's not that much choice, perhaps, for some of those southern New South Wales teams.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's a really good point. And yeah, I think there's a lot of factors that need to be considered there as to what that looks like and what potential model would support every single club in that northern Victoria or southern New South Wales region. So yeah, it is a good one to bring up. So I suppose we'll keep an eye on
Yeah,
what was it, Project Northern Rivers? Is that what it was?
yeah,
That
yeah.
we'll keep an eye on that and see if there's anything further that comes through over the course of this period. Is it
Well,
any
I can tell you that Ultima have officially applied again to
okay?
to to head to the Central Murray League. So yeah, as I started that segment off with, their application was knocked back for this season, but they've officially applied again, I understand. So
Yeah.
this is really what's going to set the wheels in motion in that region. To the Golden Rivers League has, I guess, been put on notice that hey, Ultima really want to go,
Mm,
and so a decision's going to have to be made
yeah.
this
And
season on that.
reading into that, is that we might not know, we might only be speculating. Is that just wanting to get some better competition, noting that they have sort of won the flag and um, albeit in a very close match against Hay, but I think from memory, Ultima have always been fairly strong in that league. Is that what we think the push is from Ultima there, or is it actually does it come back to some of that travel time and distance for them as well?
Not sure.
Yeah,
Not sure. No, the reporting I've seen on it hasn't elaborated um,
the reasons.
on the reasoning.
Mm.
So, I mean, I'm just looking at results from the Golden Rivers League. I mean, Ultima won the flag in 2024. Hay won the flag in 2023. But
Okay,
Ultima's most recent flag prior to that was 2015. So it's
okay. So
and
maybe
Hay's most recent flag prior to that was 1995. So it's not like these two teams have been far and
powerhouses.
away ahead of the pack for a really long time.
Yeah.
As I said, the league doesn't look outrageously uncompetitive to me, compared to some others that we've talked about.
Mm.
Um, So yeah, I don't know what's going on there. I don't know what the reasoning is behind the desire to move. Um, yeah, curious.
Very curious. Thank you for bringing that in for Footy Firestarters, and yeah, I think we'll keep an eye on that as the season progresses and see if there's any further updates that do occur to Project Northern Rivers. But Rob, we might segue into our paddock to premiership. So
I
yeah,
hope your picks are doing better than mine.
well, without giving anything away, I think I've been pretty happy with my paddock to premiership picks
All
so
right,
far.
go on then.
But certainly, as we said, one picked with the head, one picked with the heart, and a wild card. We might go back and forth here so that
All right,
into we can get some good news with the bad news potentially.
please.
But my head pick was Castlemaine. We spoke about them last week with the good win over Golden Square. They had a okay win, a 21-point win against Kangaroo Flats. Moved them to 2-1, and a big year clash coming up this weekend against South Bendigo. And you mentioned earlier, and what caught your eye, South Bendigo look like they might be one of the real dark horses in that Bendigo league, albeit they did lose to Eagle Hawk on Anzac Day in what was a pretty awful game with rain basically pelting down from start to finish. I watched a little bit of that on the old live stream, and yeah, I can confidently say I'm glad I was tucked up in the house watching that as opposed to being out there in the field. But yeah, Castlemaine moved to 2-1, and certainly looking a much positive season compared to what Castlemaine's had in the past.
Nice, that's good. I'm happy with that one too. Um, I'll just put Fitzroy out of the way here. We've already touched on them. No good. 20-point loss to Williamstown. Zip and three. On to the next.
Yep. My pick with the heart, the old North Albury Hoppers. They came up against the Albury Tigers. I don't know whether that's a big rivalry clash. I'd assume it would be North Albury
I hope so.
Albury. But a nice 69-point win to the Hoppers.
Very good.
So they also moved to 2-1. They've only dropped to Wang Rovers, who won the premiership last year. So things are looking good at the minute for the Hoppers. They come up against Lavington this weekend. It's funny. I just on off on a little tangent as we do. You spoke about at the start around were there any draws? I could be wrong. I thought might have been a draw on the weekend in the Ovens and Murray League. I might have to look that up whilst we're talking. But I feel like there was a draw that I saw when we were perusing through the old Play HQ on Saturday with a well-earned beer after a good Blacks win. But
Yeah, have a look.
I'll have a look whilst you talk to your next one.
Right, so my next one, my wild card pick was Karingal down in the Mornington Peninsula Div 2 section. Um, so they haven't won a game yet. They've got Nathan Burke as the coach there trying to pull that club out of the doldrums with a 10-goal loss to the Seaford Tigers. Um, Not sure. That might have been considered a not a bad result. Seaford have been reasonably strong, I think. And 10 goals is definitely not the biggest loss Karingal have had this season, but alas, they are also zip and three, same as Fitzroy. Um, Karingal played Devon Meadows this week, who are mid-table. So,
Okay.
uh, not the only team that hasn't won a game in that division, but yes, they facing an uphill battle at the moment by the looks.
Definitely. Well, I actually just got off a staff offsite where Nathan Burke again presented for us, and he did make a couple of little mentions to Kringle. I didn't want to sort of stick the knife in and ask him any questions around how things were going given some of their results. But but we're actually going to go to my final pick, my wild card, and we're actually going to go to that northern part of the state that we were just talking about, and it is Tulibuck Manangatang, and it was a 57-point win against Lake Boga. So they are well and truly have the locomotive going there in Tulibuck. They also go 2-1, and they'll stay at 2-1 because they have the bye this weekend. So they won't be playing. So get on the beers, Tulibuck Manangatang boys, and have a good weekend off. Of
I'm sure they're very responsible up there.
course.
I don't think there was any draws in the Ovens and Murray, Pete. I'm looking at it now.
No, I just had a look too, but I definitely remember seeing a draw somewhere across
All right.
Victoria. So I'm gonna keep
Oh, we'll
hunting
have a little look
around,
for that
and
during the week, maybe.
um,
I've
but
saved my good news to last on the paddock to Premiership, Pete.
I figured
Pyramid
that's what you
Hill.
were doing.
Yeah, yeah. We need to finish with some joy on my picks. Pyramid Hill, big win over Midiamo, so that's good. Good for the Bulldogs. Things look like they might be back on track after they lost to Morong pretty heavily the week before. So Pyramid Hill are 2-1. They have Bez Lagoon Serpentine. We
Yes,
love, geez, we love the names up there in Northern Victoria.
Bears
And
Lagoon.
BLS are 1-1. So interestingly, they've really staggered the start up there in the Loddon Valley League. Quite a few teams, well, about half the league has played 3 games and half the league played 2 games. So
Mm,
that's happening more and more. When I was, we were growing up, I was going to say when I was growing up, grew up at the same time. Um, we always had home and away, right? You'd be home, and you'd be away the next week, and then you'd be home the next week, and you all played at the same time. And these days, there's a lot of funny buggers going on with the fixtures. There's, round zeros and St Bernard's came and played at the Uni Main twice in 2 weeks in the VAFA. All sorts of weird things going on.
outrageous. I must admit there was I have found that drawn match, by the way, so I'll
Oh, very
mention
good.
that in a
Yep.
second. But it's in the Northern Footy League, that drawn match. But what that also reminded me of is you and I were looking at the results in the Northern Footy League, and we saw that Altham had beaten Greensborough, and we went, oh, okay, there you go. And then we went down two more, and we saw Greensborough had beaten South Morang, and we went, huh? What's going on here? I was like, no wonder they lost to Alton. They were splitting themselves across two different. And then what it turned out is that they'd played round three. One of those round three matches was in the 18th of April, and the other one was on the 26th of April. So yeah, some funny buggers certainly going on with the draws. But that drawn game was in the Northern Footy League, and it was Hurstbridge 13-14-92 drew North Heidelberg 14-8-92. So
Oh, there's always, it's remarkable to me how often when there's a draw, it's not the same goals and behinds. There is often, very often seems to be one team that kicked really badly and really should have won it.
mm, did
Yeah.
look like a great game throughout the whole. It was a 9-point lead to North Heidelberg at quarter time, a 2-point lead to North Heidelberg at half time, an 8-point lead to North Heidelberg at three-quarter time, and then scores level at the end of the game. So, without going through the actual play-by-play scores, if you just look at the end quarter scores, 9 points was the highest margin at that point. So, um,
Yeah,
yeah, so there you go. I don't know if that's the first one we've had in local footy. Surely it can't be. Surely
probably not, but
there's
first
probably
one we've
one
found.
somewhere around, but it's the first one we've found, and I would have stayed here all night until I managed to find that because I remembered seeing it on the Saturday
Yeah,
night when we were looking at Play HQ. But yeah, some good selections there for Paddock to Premiership going well. Some that are struggling a little bit and need to get the season well and truly kick-started. And let's hope Fitzroy and Kringle can do that in the near future. so that you have a little bit more positive things to talk about. But that's where we're at with Paddock to Premiership, and yeah, we'll have to see how they continue to go. Last week's episode, of course, we did have Brandon Weatherson, and we interviewed him, and we certainly asked him around who's his go-to in terms of, say, a Paddock to Premiership that he would check up on Play HQ. He mentioned Longwood based off the fact that he played a season there at Longwood, and I can say that Longwood did have a 15-point win against Undera, or Undera, however you want to pronounce that.
Andera.
And yeah, they had a 15-point win. So there you go. The things are looking pretty rosy there at Longwood. No, it's not. That's actually their first win for the year. So
Or
good,
more
good,
rosy. More
more
rosy.
rosy now than what it was. So
Yeah, that's good. All right, that might be about all we've got time for on this episode. Thank you very much for joining us. We've had a lot covered. Keep your ears tuned. We're going to try and get some more interview content to you very soon. We hope that your team has a good win on the weekend. We hope that there's some more losing streaks that are broken. And yeah, good luck to everyone. Have a good week, and we will see you next time.